Hello, Blythe, Evie, Joe, Jack, Callum, Cadence, Lucy, Orion, and anyone else who's listening. Welcome to Story Time. Today's story is Daisy-Head Mayzie by Dr. Seuss. You can see on the very opening cover all the beautiful daisies. This book is interesting because it was written by Dr. Seuss a long time ago, but that it didn't become published until after he had died. So it first came out in 1995 when his wife found it in his study. She hadn't seen it, and so she took it to his agent, that's a person who represents you in business, and showed it to him and asked him if he could get it published. So first it was made into an animated movie, which you can look it up and you can see it online if you want to. And the illustrator, the person who illustrated it, isn't mentioned in the book as the illustrator for the book. His name is Joe Mathieu, Mathieu, because he illustrated for the movie. And then they published the book after the movie. Then in 2016, they republished the book with the original drawings done by Dr. Seuss. So you can look up that book too, because there's just some differences in the drawings. Joe Mathieu tried to follow Dr. Seuss's kind of sketching, but there's a little bit of difference. And then he changed some minor things, like the Cat in the Hat narrates the movie and the book, this book, but it's a man who narrates Dr. Seuss's version. So anyway, the dedication says, to the ongoing presence of Theodore S. Geisel, Dr. Seuss, thanks Herb. Herb is the name of the agent who made the book possible. Audrey Geisel, who was Dr. Seuss's wife. So let's begin with the story. It's hard to believe such a thing could be true, and I hope such a thing never happens to you. But it happened, they say, to poor Mayzie McGrew, and it happened like this. She was sitting one day at her desk in her school in her usual way when she felt a small twitch on the top of her head. So Mayzie looked up, and she almost dropped dead. Something peculiar was going on there. A daisy was sprouting right out of her hair. Oh my goodness. Behind her was sitting young Herman Butch Strudel. This looks like a daisy up here on her noodle. It doesn't make sense. Why, it couldn't be so. A noodle's no place for a daisy to grow. Then up spoke another boy, Einstein Van Tass, the brightest young man in the whole of the class. It's a very odd place to be sprouting a daisy, but nevertheless one is growing on Mayzie. Hey, look it, cried Butch, right here in this room. Daisy-Head Mayzie, she's bursting in bloom. Miss Sneecher, the teacher, came rushing up quick. Such nonsense! Some child here is playing a trick. Which one of you boys stuck that thing in her hair? You know that a daisy could never grow there. But teacher, said Butch, I saw the thing rise right out of her head with my very own eyes. Just give it a yank if you think I tell lies. But Miss Sneecher had heard quite enough of this talk. Mayzie, hold still. Let me get at that stalk. Ouch! hollered Mayzie. Quit yanking, Butch said. You're giving her pains. I'll bet those roots go way down in her brains. The kids in the class started shouting like crazy. Daisy-Head, Daisy-Head, Daisy-Head Mayzie. "Children, be quiet! Good grief and alas!" Miss Sneecher was shocked by the noise in her class. "I've taught in this room 20 years, maybe more, but I've never seen anything like this before. I'll have to report it. You'll just have to come to the principal's office and show Mr. Grum." Look at all the kids looking out the doors and the windows of their classroom. Now the principal, good Mr. Gregory Grum, was a very wise man, just as smart as they come. He knew more than anyone else in this nation about long division and multiplication. He knew all the answers, why oceans are deep, why skies are so high, and why mountains are steep. He should have the answer to this thing on Mayzie. "My word," he declared, "it's a genuine daisy. I've seen them quite often in fields growing wild, but never before on the head of a child. Now what in the world ever made this thing sprout? I have no idea, but I'm going to find out." Look at all of his books. He's going to look it up. It says daisies grow on the land. They grow between rocks, they grow also in sand. It mentions right here they can grow in a pot, but mention the head of a girl it does not. Daisies, it says, sometimes grow in Alaska, also Missouri, Rhode Island, Nebraska. They grow in Japan and in Spain and Peru, in India, France, and in Idaho too. They also grow in South Boston and also in Rome. But why should they grow on this little girl's dome? He can't figure it out, can he? "Say, look it," said Mayzie. "It's wilting, it's drooping. How wonderful, Mayzie. It soon will be dead. You'll be rid of that daisy." "In just a few minutes our troubles will pass," declared Mr. Grum. "Take her back to the class." Then the principal saw a most terrible sight. The daisy was dying, and that was all right. But that daisy was part of poor Mayzie McGrew, and Mayzie was starting to wilt away too. "Teacher," said Mr. Grum, "you know what I think? They're both going to die. Hurry, bring them a drink." "That daisy, the girl's the worst problem in town. You take her away and you make her lie down. You lock her up tight in that room down the hall. There are quite a few numbers that I've got to call. Get Maisie's parents on the end of the line. I need them here quickly while there is still time." On the phone, Maisie's mom asked, "What's all the fuss?" Then, "Goodness to Betsy, I'll catch the next bus." A call to the shoe store reached Mr. McGrew. He answered while holding a customer's shoe. "Yes, this is... Oh no, I really must go." "A doctor should see her," the principal said, "and an expert on plants like the one on her head." So he called Dr. Eisenbart, who said, "What a trick. My stethoscope's packed. I'll be there in a tick." "Wait, Doc," said his patient. "I'll come along too. My brother's a vet, and he knows this McGrew." When he heard, Finch the florist grabbed for his shears. "I'll be there just as soon as my truck can shift gears." Meanwhile, poor Mayzie lay down on a couch. The daisy slumped down on its leaves in a slouch. But the window was open because it was warm, and the sweet-smelling daisy attracted a swarm of bees. Buzz! Bees! Bees! The faster she ran, the faster they flew. So Mayzie kept running. What else could she do? She attempted to hide behind Officer Thatcher, who cupped out his hat like a bumblebee catcher. The bees took his hat. Thatcher said, "I'm no fool," and ran after Mayzie back to the school. Principal Grum didn't know what to do. "It's worse," cried Miss Sneecher, "much worse than we feared. The daisy and Mayzie have both disappeared." Behind her came charging Mr. McGrew, chased by a customer chasing his shoe. Finch the florist, Dr. Eisenbart too, Dr. Eisenbart's patient, and Mrs. McGrew. look at all of them running after, running to see what's going on. The teacher and Mr. McGrew holding that one guy's shoe, and he's in the line with only one shoe on. The Dr. Eisenbart, the florist, the Dr. Eisenbart's patient, and Mrs. McGrew, her mother. Then, through the window with Officer Thatcher, who slammed the pane shut so the bees couldn't catch her, jumped Mayzie McGrew to the floor in a splatter, with the Daisy still there, except taller and fatter. "My poor little daughter, the Daisy, it's true, I'm going to faint," cried Mrs. McGrew. "Tut, tut," said the florist, "there's no need for tears, just because there's a daisy between her two ears. I'll snip it right off with my sharp pruning shears." "She's my patient, don't touch her, you stand apart, we have to have room," said Dr. Eisenbart. "I think that Mayzie and her plant could help me get a research grant." Then the door opened wide, and the mayor stepped inside. At meetings and greetings, there was none to compare. He was best at long speeches, chock full of hot air. "I promise, my friends, that if I'm re-elected, this Daisy on Mayzie will be disconnected. The law of our fathers is simple and sound. Daisies belong and should stay in the ground. The rest are illegal. We'll bar them from town." Good. Politician. From the back came a voice, sometimes loud, sometimes slick, of a wheeler and dealer who knew every trick. "I'm Finagle the agent. You've heard of me, I'm sure. I represent young What's-His-Name and others now on tour. But Mayzie, you're so special, please let me shake your hand. Your talent is a wondrous thing, unique in all the land. Daisy-Head Mayzie, spelled out in bright light, will draw kids in the day and parents at night. Daisy-Head Mayzie, you've got quite an act. Just stick with me, kid, and sign this contract. Your flower needs to sign too." Her mother said, "Mayzie, don't be a fool," and the principal begged her not to leave school. But Mayzie didn't stop to blink. She signed her name in think-proof ink, and the daisy signed too. Daisy-head fever was gripping the nation. It had quickly become a worldwide sensation. Daisy had burgers and Daisy had drinks. Daisy had stockings and Daisy had sinks. Daisy had buttons and Daisy had bows. Mayzie was famous, the star of her shows. Fame had knocked on Maizie's door. Now she had it all and more. Piles of money stacked in tens. But what is money without friends? A dream had led her far astray. That was the price she had to pay. Mayzie McGrew ran night and day, nowhere to go, nowhere to stay, because she was sure that everyone must have written her off in total disgust. Over and over again in her head, these are the words that poor Mayzie said. "I can never go home. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me." Nobody loved her? Poor Mayzie McGrew. It's hard to believe such a thing could be true. And maybe that's why, then, this daisy above when Mayzie below began talking of love. Well, you know about daisies when love is in doubt. The job of a daisy is try and find out. So the daisy starts dropping the petals. They love her not. They love her not. Don't worry, Mayzie. They love you. They love me. So back home she goes. Well, that's how it all happened. The thing went away, and Mayzie McGrew is quite happy today, back at her studies and doing just great in all of her subjects in room number 8. And concerning that daisy, you know that it never grew out of the top of her head again, ever. Well, it practically never popped up there again, excepting occasionally, just now and then. Ding! And after all, I'm getting used to it. So she's okay. The end. Well, I hope you liked it. Then you get to see all the beautiful daisies again at the end. And you can look up the movie and look up the original book or drawings by Dr. Seuss. I think I might order that book and maybe we'll look at it again another time so you can see Dr. Seuss's illustrations instead of Joe Matthews' illustrations. We won't have story time tomorrow, but on Monday we're going to read the book David Gets in Trouble by David Shannon, also illustrated by David Shannon. And I think you'll like it. It's lots of fun. So take good care of yourselves, love on each other, always love yourself, and always remember that I love you all the way to the moon and back. We'll be back together on Monday for story time when we read David Gets in Trouble by David Shannon. Bye-bye.